Hello friends, welcome. Friends, yesterday TRAI came out with this directive, and this directive is all about preventing spam calling in India. The calls which you receive from unsolicited individuals from private numbers trying to sell something or the other. Now, what TRA is saying that in case you are receiving calls from any person who is using a private number and trying to sell you something, you have to make a complaint. Once that complaint is verified, established that the person who is supposed to not use the private number for making commercial calls is becomes a repeated offender, then all his telecom resources, not just the number, all his telecom resources is going to get suspended for a period of 2 years. Now, this directive actually is not new. This is a very old regulation of TRAI, and let me show you the earlier regulation which was issued on 19th of July 2018. So what TRAI has done is TRAI has only reiterated these regulations. All the rules of this particular regulation, which says the telecom commercial communication customer preferences regulation, which is called 2018 6 of 18. This is the regulation which TRAI has reiterated in this directive. This directive which you are seeing, which was released on the 13th of August. This is the directive. So there is nothing new about it. Only thing that old directive of 2018 was not getting implemented. So what TRA is saying, nothing doing. It is, we are fed up. Please implement that earlier directive and all the clauses of the directive from identification to penalization and suspension of telecom resources of a spammer has to be religiously followed, and the operator has to report back to TRAI on the various actions that the operator is taking in order to contain spam calling. Now friends, what I have done is, because this becomes a little complicated and there are too many rules and regulations to refer to, so I will not go through the directive because nobody will be interested in reading the directive from a legal perspective. So I will give you a very high level understanding of the situation, and this video is going to talk to you about whether this directive is sufficient or it is a temporary phenomena. Now if you understand that, let's say if there are parasites which has grown in your farm, and you put pesticide in order to contain those plants which are unwanted plants, you typically notice that after some time they will come back again. You have to keep on putting pesticides of different types and varieties, but you will never be able to root out the problem. So what I'm trying to say is that whether this is going to root out the problem or not, or it's going to create a temporary phenomena, and more so whether there will be collateral damage of implementing a system of suspension of all telecom resources. This is important. Suspension of all telecom resources of an individual who has been caught spamming. So what kind of collateral damage is going to be seen as we move forward, going forward implementing this direction, and whether this direction is going to be foolproof and going to prevent spamming to happen in future. That's the whole purpose of this video. So let's discuss. So fortunately friend, before recording this call, I wrote a detailed article on this subject. I am going to paste a link of this article in the description for anybody who is interested to read can go through and understand. In this article, what I have done is I have just kind of given a summary of what the TRAI has said and what is the intent of this. And then what I am doing here is that I am talking about the collateral damage. What kind of collateral damage that you are going to face if blocking of resources are going to get implemented for a period of 2 years. Not just one telephone number, all telecom resources. This is important. All telecom resources is being talked about in this directive. And then as you go down in this article, I also talk about evaluating the effectiveness of the current regulation and directive to prevent spamming on a permanent basis, what kind of problems which we are going to incur, right? And then I conclude and I give some kind of remedies, what to do and what I'm going to talk about it in this video. So let's first talk about the collateral damage, right? And this is important for everybody to understand. So I'll give you a example. Let's say you are a legal customer who is holding a legal connection and a very law abiding citizen. You don't have any intent to spam anybody, and you don't make any calls to anybody, and you are very law abiding, and you're doing your own business, and you're calling a family and doing all kind of business work with your telephone number. Now let's say somebody holds a connection in your name, one connection, only one connection in your name, and by forging documents, which is very easily available. It can be done very easily in India because documents can be forged and you can basically take connection in anybody, because Aadhaar numbers and everything is floating all over the place in our country. People have been giving documents and sharing documents for various purposes, photo ID, everything is available. Now once a connection has been established or taken by a spammer under your name and you are not aware of it, let's say, and he keeps on making spam calls using that particular connection, and he doesn't hit to any of the warnings, nothing, right? And the operator calls him, tells him that you are a spammer, please stop, but he doesn't relent. And at the end of the day, operator will do what? He will basically pull out all the connections relating to that particular person from his database and will block all the resources of that person, including yours. Now you will suddenly realize that all your telecom resources have got blocked just because some rogue entity is spamming on your behalf using a forged identity. Now this can be also resolved. It's not that this can be resolved. How you will resolve it? It is your responsibility as an individual to know which telecom number has been assigned under your name. Now you will not be able to do that. How will you cannot, because you do not have any mechanism to verify. So there has to be a mechanism, a centralized mechanism in place where all the KYCs of all the operators have to be pulled in and harmonized in order to ensure that the identity of the individual whose telecom resources are spread around all the telecom service provider of the country is properly identified and marked. And you can then dip into the database using a web page and try to check which service is under your name and which services is being misused by somebody else with a forged identity, and you can inform the telecom operator about that incident, and that resources can be taken out or can be verified and seen who is saying what, whether you are right or that person is right. So there will be some kind of dispute which has to be resolved. If at all the other person takes that identity as his own and says that you are a spammer or you are a forged a person has somehow spoofed his identity. So there has to be some dispute, and by which the resolution will take place. So there are two things here. One is that all KYCs of individual operators have to be harmonized. And it is important for that to be harmonized because the email ID, the telephone numbers can be recorded in different mechanism because there are no single template which is followed. You may give a different email ID to a particular service provider, somebody may give a different ID, there may not be email ID existing, the number, there will be no alternative number, he will only call the primary number to inform the user that and then when the action has to be taken, then all the resources for all the service provider will be pulled in and blocked, because he is not going to basically call for all the CLIs or all the KYCs at that moment, unless and until this whole thing about KYC harmonization happens in advance. It cannot be done in isolation. You have to have a KYC harmonized database placed right there where the KYC of all the operators are pooled in and harmonized, so that the identity of all the telecom resources spread across all the operators are clearly established and nailed up against an individual, which currently is not done. Every operator has their own CLIs, own KYC process, and there is no harmonization across. So this is important. And the second thing which is important is the consumer has to be more, you can say, enlightened and proactive to check whether the resources are all his or somebody is forging his resources. So that is the second. And the third important thing is that if, let's say, a resource is genuine, let's say if you are having 5 telephone numbers, I'm just giving an example, a landline number, and some of the numbers are given to your driver or somebody else has been given, and somebody shares this number to somebody else, and you are not aware, who is doing what, who is making what call. And somebody who is holding your KYC and makes some spam calls and it becomes a repeated offender, and that you cannot, basically you are not doubting the credentials of that telephone number because it is in your name, somebody else is using, and he is spamming on your behalf, and he is being called upon and warned that please don't spam, and after repeated often warning, he does not listen, and because he is a spammer and he's only one of the telecom resource of yours is being used in spam, all your numbers, including your personal numbers, where all the Aadhaar number, banks, etc. is getting attached, will get blocked and you will be out of business. Okay? This is exactly what is going to happen. So, what has to happen? Then, the mechanism of blocking has to be a very serious affair. Each and every individual number has to be called. Somebody has to come individually to meet that person in face to face, telling that, look, your number is going to get blocked. Are you aware this is going on? So it cannot be a arm's length kind of activity. Somebody calling you from somewhere and then telling you that your number. How do you know who is on the other side? It is not a video call, it may be a telephone call. How do you know who is speaking from the other side? Whether that particular person, are you going to do an authentication before you call, before the person is established? It may not be possible. And maybe there would be some forged numbers and forged identity which is already aware, people may be already aware, right? So it's such a big exercise. I do not know, what kind of, situation that you are going to get in. So this is one problem that I saw, and I thought of letting you know about this problem, that how much difficult situation that people will get in, and what kind of violations will take place, and the collateral damage associated with it. Then let's talk about the effectiveness of the current regulation, which is very important. What do I mean by effectiveness? Effectiveness means that, let's assume that the number that is getting displayed on your handset or somebody's handset, from somewhere a call is being made. Let's say some XYZ guy makes a call, right, from a telephone number. And that telephone number, the call that is being made from a telephone number, the CLI that gets displayed on the handset of the other person receiving the call is a different CLI, not the CLI or not the calling line identification number of the originator of the individual who is originating the call. Now you may ask me how it is possible. How can a person making a call, right, from a number, and as the call travels through the network and reaches the caller, who is getting the mobile number displayed on his mobile, is receiving something else, some other identification than of the caller. See, it can be done from locally as well as internationally. Let me explain how. Typically, VoIP switches, and let me go to this PPT, then only you will be able to understand, because I have a diagram here. Now this diagram is as follows. Let's go through the diagram and explanation. So what I have done is, I have created 4 switches, and you will understand this very clearly once I explain to you. So this is in Indian territory, right? So this is India, okay, within India, and this is a foreign territory. This one is foreign, outside this geography on top of it, right? This is foreign territory. Within India, there are local exchanges. Exchange number 1, exchange number 2, and then there is a trunk exchange. Now, you as a customer will be connected to a local exchange, correct? Let's say if you have a mobile here. So that mobile number will have a identification, 10-digit identification number, which is the calling number from which you are going to call. Normally, the mobile number, if not registered within this operator's exchange, will not allow that call to pass. Means you will not be able to make any call. But there are systems available which are called PAVX VoIP switches, which I have shown here connected to the international gateway. This can be connected here also. And using that PAVX, you can do a spoofing of the CLI. Means you can change the CLI. Some are done legally, some are done illegally. Now you may say that the TRAI Directive prevents all the PAVXs which are located within the country to do this activity, and if anybody found doing this, that business will be shut down. Correct? I agree with you. It is possible that their business will be shut down, and therefore nobody might at some point of time implement it, other than using fraud identification and taking the number in your name, which I already spoke about, and how to prevent it. So I can understand that this may be a foolproof system if properly implemented. But what about somebody using a VoIP exchange and connected to an exchange in a foreign country, let's say Bangladesh or Nepal, and then this exchange, this VoIP exchange, which is connected to a foreign exchange located in Bangladesh, Nepal, or any other, Russia or any other country, from where when this guy makes a call, he will make a call, but the CLI which will get transmitted from this international trunk exchange to the local trunk exchange located in India, which is the international trunk exchange, is going to receive a number which will be local of India. Means it will be a 10-digit number, whether it is 98 or something will be received from this number. So this person who is basically using the trunk exchange, means the trunk operator will not be able to recognize whether this number is a genuine number which is registered in India, or is a number which is cloned, or it is fake number. Okay, so there is a possibility of this number getting faked. Now, how do you basically check fake numbers? Let's understand this. There could be, you can say that anything is possible. Technically, anything is possible to be implemented in this world. Correct. You are absolutely right. Technically, everything in this world is possible. Even you can go and travel to Mars and sit down and establish a colony, which will also be technically possible in next 5 years. Okay. So anything is technically possible, right? Within this realm of our technology, that how the technology has been growing, and this technology, telecom technology, is a very mature technology. Everything is possible, and computer technology has matured for such a long period of time. So the way to check it, let me just give you some examples. The way to check it is that let's say this is run by Airtel, this trunk exchange is run by Airtel, and if Airtel receives a number which is coming with a locally spoofed CLI of an Indian number, then if that number does not belong to his network, then what he will do, or he or she, what Airtel will do, what it will do, it will simply pass it on and hand over to the entity for which the number is. For example, this exchange is of BSNL. So what Airtel will do, Airtel will take this number and hand over to BSNL. It will not block it, because it doesn't have any capability to understand whether this number genuinely belongs to BSNL or Reliance or not. Because Airtel can know his own, he can dip into his own HLR or VLR and try to figure it out whether this number is, that too is a very, very onerous task. But if the number does not belong to his trunk exchange, to his network, then he is going to simply pass it along. So how is he going to block it? So it's a very difficult exercise to do. So that is why, if you see here, I am going to basically show you a document, which is FCC had issued recently on 2022, and if you look at this document, you will find what FCC had said. This is a document which is released of 20th April 2022. This document says what? It says that this has got a fact sheet, and there are details, regulation which are laid down. Because I'm not going to go into the details, because this is good about FCC. They put a fact sheet before the regulation, before the detailed regulation. So what it is saying, they are basically combating robocalls originating from international jurisdiction. That's what FCC is saying in 20th April 2022. It is saying what is the gateway provider, that international gateway which I talked about, would do. It will require the gateway provider to submit a certification of migrating plan to robocall mitigation database and describing their robocall migration practices, certifying that they are adhering to those practices. There is a robocall mitigation mechanism has to be inbuilt into the gateway exchanges. Then it says, requires the gateway provider to implement a stir-shaken system, which I'm going to explain right now, to authenticate unauthorized session initiated protocol carrying the US number, means US local number. So there is a call originating from international territory with a US local numbers, and those local numbers may be spoofed. They may not be genuine numbers, they may be cloned or fake numbers. And then it says adopt several robocall mitigation mechanisms for gateway providers, including 24-hour traceback response request, blah blah blah. What the order of reconsideration would do? Require the domestic provider to accept all calls carrying US numbers only from foreign originating intermediary provider registered in the robocall mitigation database. You understand what this is saying? Foreign originating and intermediating provider has to register into robocall mitigating database. So there is a responsibility for the foreign players also to participate in the robocall. So it is not going to be only limited, the whole activity cannot be limited by just making sure that every bit guy within the country has been completely squashed into the fear of penalty and suspension. No, because the whole world, we are actually living in a world where everybody can contribute and enter your territory from the internet or from the gateway, which, and as if that they are part of your own country using your own identity. So it is saying that, so this has to be, so this is the problem. Now there is another issue. Let's say if the call originates from an international gateway using a local CLI and the customer makes a complaint to TRAI or the operator saying that, look, this number is being continuously coming to me. So then what happens is that the whole redressal mechanism and penalization mechanism falls through, because that number could belong to somebody else. So now the operator has to first verify from where the call originated, whether it originated from the international gateway, it originated from locally in India, whether the person was roaming or not. You can imagine the kind of work the operator has to do in order to ensure that whatever penalization he has to do is not going to result in a collateral damage. So it's like a humongous amount of task. Now let me just tell you what the current rules and regulation which FCC has laid out in its website. So this is a website which is very recent website, recent direction. It's a I think it's in 2024. So if you go to the, I'll paste a link in this description. So it says stop unwanted robocall and text. So what it is basically saying is it has various direction, consumer tips. So it's saying, I'll just point to one of the very interesting consumer tips. What it says that don't answer calls from unknown numbers. If you answer such a call, hang up immediately. You may not be able to tell right away that if an incoming call is spoofed. Be aware, caller ID shown as local number does not necessarily mean it's a local number. So you see, a country like US is still struggling where whether its number is local or international, right? So there are other things which this document talks about, this website talks about regarding preventing calls which are originating from international numbers, which is creating this havoc in the territory. So what US has done is, if you go to my PPT, so I have summarized here and I'll go into this. What US is doing is, yes, US basically has the following mechanism, though it is not yet being working in a perfect condition. So what FCC is saying is, FCC's rules on robocalls do not include provision of blocking all telecom resources of callers who fail to desist from making unwanted calls, right? So what FCC is doing? However, FCC's approach primarily targets the prevention and mitigation of robocalls through blocking and labeling rather than punitive measure against individual caller by suspending all his telecom resources because of the collateral damage which I spoke about. It may create some kind of stopgap fear, and those might prevent the players to make calls because they were so used to making calls with impunity because nobody was tracing them, nobody was saying anything to them. Now TRA is saying, I'm going to block all your resources, people will stop. Then they will figure out a mechanism which I told you. They will go to international players, they will have tie-up with them, they will make robocalls from there which is going to be untraceable, and whole redressal and penalizing mechanism will fall apart because those CLIs which will enter the country will either be completely fake or will map with a genuine customer who is holding a number of the same CLI which entered through the international gateway. You got my problem, the point. So this issue is not an easy issue to solve. Even with such directive which persisted from such a long period of time, the call issue has not yet solved. So what has to happen? Really what has to happen, let me just give you the steps which is there in my article. If you go to my article, you will see that I have spoken about some of the key measures that we have to over a long period of time, because this is maybe an interim measure. I'm not saying that what TRA has done is bad. What I'm saying is that the battle against spam must be fought on multiple fronts. What we have to do, we have to enhance the CLI security. And how will you enhance CLI security? Let's say if you have a switch, and in the switch, if you are trying to call, and if the switch does not map or encrypt the CLI, that the calling line identification, so that the mapping cannot be broken as the call travels from one part of the network to another, somebody can spoof in between and change the CLI, right? So that should not be allowed. So you have to have enhanced CLI security. Then you have to tag international calls. Means if a call originates from an international location with a local CLI of India, then as the consumer gets the call, he should basically get some marking inside the call that look, this call is an Indian number, but it actually originated from a trunk exchange. But that is easily possible. So if you get a marking, the consumer will be much more enlightened whether to pick up that call, because if a call originates from the local jurisdiction, then people tend to trust that call because it looks like that it has come from nearby, right? So people may not be able to mislead them by calling it from international location, and may fool them and cheat them with various kind of bank fraud that are taking place in this country. And then we have to strengthen border control, fortify our network borders to ensure that calls with local CLI from non-roaming international numbers are effectively screened and blocked if necessary. So relying solely on punitive measure is risky and often ineffective given the scale of robocalls and the ease of spoofing numbers internationally. A cooperative strategy including regulators, service providers, technology developers is essential. Together we can develop an effective solution to tackle the root cause of spam, protecting innocent users from imposing harsh measures inadvertently cause distress or fail as a spammer may be seen to innovate around restriction by exploiting unplugged loopholes. So friends, I hope that you probably liked this video, understood that what kind of risk that it possesses and what are the additional measures that are required, and why blocking may not be a sustainable solution. And so that's what I wanted to cover in this video, and let me know if you have any feedback, and I'll come back to you. And thanks for your listening, and I'll come back to you with a new video next time. Thank you very much.